Hello everyone, we've gone to the wrong one. Hello everybody, welcome to the TPN podcast once again. It's been like almost a month since our last one and quite a lot has happened. I'm joined by again my good old friend Tommy Bowyer.
Hello, yes, it's been quite a long time, and of course last time we did this there was the political environment was very different to what it is now, so I'm looking forward to this podcast so we can discuss these matters.
So, what has happened since our last podcast? Well, we had the Tory leadership election. Now, when we first last had our podcast, we went through the candidates that were, and there was like something like 10 of them at the time when we last did our podcast, and now we're down to the final two. The final charge of each candidate's voting among the Tory membership closes today. So if you haven't posted your ballot, then your vote's not going to count.
No.
Unless you posted it yesterday, and it might still count. But the results will be announced on the 23rd, so that is tomorrow on a Tuesday.
Yep.
And on Wednesday will be Theresa May's last day in the role as the role of Prime Minister, and she's going to go somewhere. I don't know.
Yep. Her last day will involve doing her last Prime Minister's question session. And then she will be going to the palace and handing in her resignation to Queen Elizabeth II. And the Queen will then invite the leader of the Conservative Party, whether that's Boris Johnson or Jeremy Hunt, to form the next government.
Yes. And we've already seen some people already not happy with Boris.
No. It's so sad to see the likes of Philip Hammond leaving cabinet.
I know, Mr. Enthusiasm and Prosperity himself has said he'll leave if Boris Johnson gets in charge. Yes, Mr. Happy is fine. Said he's going to leave. As you can tell, I'm going to be very sad about that.
Yeah, we've recently in the last couple of days we've seen a stream. Well, not so much a stream. However, a lot of the hardcore Remainers in the cabinet begin to pack their bags and are starting to depart. Of course, we've seen Philip Hammond, who said that he's actually going to resign to Theresa May just before she goes to the palace in order to not go through the embarrassment that George Osborne did of being fired by their successor. Of course, Justice Secretary David Gauke, I'm sure International Development Secretary Rory Stewart will also be handing in their resignations and departing before they're actually fired by Boris Johnson.
Well, we say by Boris Johnson, that's if Boris Johnson does get in charge.
I'm
because
getting ahead of myself there.
The final two is between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt, another big peddler of optimism of Brexit.
Yep, Jeremy Hunt during this campaign has flip-flopped at least 3 times. He started off by saying a no deal would be political suicide, to then saying when the MPs were voting that he's actually okay with a no deal now and he would take us out on October the 31st if there was no deal in sight, to saying in the last couple of days that actually he's not very keen on no deal and he really wants to push through a deal as quickly as possible. So the amount he's flip-flopped during this contest, just imagine how many times he would flip-flop if he became Prime Minister.
So we got Jeremy Hunt versus the jolly good Boris Johnson, which I think if you've watched our podcast before, you would know that we're probably in favour of when it comes to Hunt versus Boris. And yeah, I think it's safe to say he's both our first choice we would pick out of the two.
Well, it's obviously Boris. I never had a problem with Boris being Prime Minister. Of course, he weren't my first choice, and he was neither Matthew's first choice either. We both supported different candidates. However, as soon as both our candidates were eliminated from the contest, we decided that Boris Johnson was the firm favourite compared to all the other candidates who were in. Because Boris, a lot of people might not like Boris because, you know, a lot of people see him as unpredictable, and as Jeremy Hunt said during one of the debates, he said, we don't just need optimism at a time like this. However, as Boris said, I think it's time the country needs a bit of optimism. We've had Theresa May for the last 3 years just kind of surrender everything to the EU, whereas Boris is the complete alternative. He's optimistic. He thinks that Britain is such a great place to be and we should be proud to be British. And what can I say? I'm looking forward, if he does win this contest, for him taking over from May.
Boris Johnson is, of course, a great peddler of optimism. He has the charm, the charismatic to make people smile, make people think, hang on, that's quite good. And I don't know, get a lot of people on side and, make the Conservative Party popular again. Make them popular, make them soar through the polls, make them soar through a general election once again. But he's also said that they can't, there's always rumours of a general election and all that, of ways, because Boris Johnson's come out and said that if we kick the can, then we kick the bucket. So therefore, no extension. The 31st of October is the absolute deadline, and that we cannot miss it once again.
Yes, he has said. He's also said that, I don't know if this has been confirmed yet, however, I'm sure his team is starting to plan for the possibility of an early general election later in the year. If anything, there probably would be a general election in September or October if the Remainers are really trying to stop a no-deal Brexit going through. And of course, no idea how that would turn out. I mean, we haven't seen what happened yet. However, from recent polling, it does show that Boris Johnson being leader of the Conservatives would significantly increase the chances of the Conservatives not falling and losing the massive seats which they would have lost if Theresa May had led them into an election. So I think Boris is the way forward for the Conservatives. I think he's going to bring new life into the Conservatives. And he's also got, as through the MP ballots, he got support from not just the hardline Brexiteers, he got support from all factions of the Conservative Party. The only ones which really don't like him is the faction probably led by Philip Hammond, Rory Stewart, David Gauke, the hardcore Remainers.
There's about 30 of them in the Conservative Party, or the hardcore Remainers, who, and some of them have even said they'd be prepared to bring down their own government in a vote of no confidence.
I mean, they went against the government whip during crucial votes to decide whether Parliament would allow for a no deal to take place, and Philip Hammond actually abstained. So he didn't vote against the government because he knew that would cost him his job. However, he's using his final few days as Chancellor to kind of start fear-mongering, to start saying that, we can't allow a no-deal to happen, which is strange because when Philip Hammond became Chancellor, I remember him saying, just after he was appointed, there's no ifs, there's no buts, we voted to leave and we're going to leave. And 3 years later, he's finally showing his true colours, that he never wanted us to leave in the first place.
And Philip Hammond and 30 other Conservative MPs, they all stood on a manifesto saying we would leave. In fact, on the 31st of March, we'll leave the customs union, we'll leave the single market, we'll leave the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, and stood on the manifesto that said no deal is better than a bad deal. He even voted for Article 50 and the Withdrawal Act, which gave the default position of the government that if a deal cannot be reached or passed through Parliament, then we leave on no deal. He voted for that motion. He voted knowing damn well that he put no deal into law already. So now why does he suddenly think he can change his tone?
I mean, of course, Matthew, you know my opinion on Philip Hammond. I've never liked Philip Hammond. I think he is just dull compared to, even former Labour chancellors such as Gordon Brown. I think Philip Hammond was just dull. He had no real enthusiasm for the job. He basically argued like an accountant, just seeing risks in absolutely everything, never taking any gambles. And I can safely say that I think he should have been fired a long time ago, and I'm glad that he's going. I find it very funny that he's handing in his resignation just before Theresa May goes to the palace, as if to say, see, look, I weren't fired. But we all know that Boris Johnson would never have allowed him to stay in that job anyway.
No. So let's go with what we all think is going to happen. Boris is going to win.
Possibility of a landslide.
Yeah. Sometimes you say in Conservative leadership elections, the favourite never wins. But yes, that's been true since 1966. But when you look at who he's up against, then it's very compelling to say Boris is going to win. Because Jeremy Hunt, despite what you may think of him, what his own party thinks of him and all that stuff, among the public and probably the Tory membership, he's nowhere near as popular as Boris.
I mean, don't get me wrong, Jeremy Hunt has surprised me during this contest. He's done a lot better than I thought. If you gave me money, I would have said it would have been Johnson versus Gove in the final two. However, it was Hunt instead by just 2 votes. And at one point I was starting to think, you know what, he's not actually talking that bad. He's actually saying we'll go for a no deal. However, he's flip-flopped in the last couple of days, and I think that just shows that he doesn't actually... He was only saying no deal to get the membership on side. He's got no optimism. He keeps saying, oh, we can't have optimism. And if I hear him say, I am an entrepreneur one more time, because that's all I've seen him talking about, having a background in entrepreneur. I'll be the first Prime Minister with a background in business. It's like, yeah, and... You know, I've never heard of him as a businessman. I've only known him as a politician. So honestly, I think that Hunt probably knows he's going to lose. I think it will be more about what margin he's going to lose by. Is it going to be a small margin, big margin, or landslide?
So let's talk about potential cabinet that Boris Johnson could form if he becomes Prime Minister tomorrow. We've seen a lot of things, a lot of politicians coming out saying that they would be actually prepared to work with Boris now and be under his cabinet. Like, if you want to talk about flip-flopping, just look at Amber Rudd. She's flip-flopped it for, like, I don't know, I've lost count now, 6 times or something.
Yeah.
She's now saying she would be prepared to work with Boris under his cabinet and support Boris Johnson.
Yeah, I think a Prime Minister's only as good as the cabinet they lead. I mean, just look at Theresa May. She filled her position with Remainers. She filled her cabinet with Remainers near the end, and it affected her Brexit strategy. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was her cabinet who agreed to offer in a second referendum if that deal got put through. Now, in terms of a lot of the senior... the problem is May's government has... they're Remainers. However, these are figures who have been in the government since David Cameron formed it in 2010. Of course, I think some of the more senior ministers like Philip Hammond, David Lidington, they'll be going, straight away. I think quite a few will be fired from that government. Yeah. I think he'll keep the odd Remainer, but not in key positions to do with leaving the EU. Yeah. Probably more, health or work and pensions.
Like, I see, like, him keeping Street Javid, Matt Hancock.
Well, I'm just going to look at... found this great website called The Guardian.
Ooh.
And I don't agree with The Guardian. However, it's gone through a list of cabinet jobs, and I have to say, I think it could be potentially spot on with a lot of the suggestions it's saying that Boris Johnson could make. So let's start off with the main one, which is Chancellor.
Chancellor of the Exchequer, yes.
Now, Chancellor of the Exchequer is technically one of the most senior and influential roles in any government. The Prime Minister has to get on with their Chancellor of the Exchequer, otherwise they face serious problems. Now, what it's saying here, and I can agree with it, is that there are 2 potential candidates who are serious contenders for the Treasury. And the first is Liz Truss, who is currently Chief Secretary to the Treasury, which is basically Deputy Chancellor. Yeah. I like Liz Truss. She's a Brexiteer, a very strong Brexiteer. And she believes in a lot of the same economic policies which Boris has said already.
I mean, she's the main backer of Boris. She is the prosper in his leadership election. And if you look at a lot of the Conservative hustings, Liz Truss has always been there, introducing Boris, essentially being his right-hand woman. And if she's been that sort of role in the leadership election, the Chancellor is the Prime Minister's right-hand man or woman in this case.
Yeah, first female Chancellor.
And first female Chancellor as well, yeah.
I see Liz Truss getting this role. The only other contender at the moment is many people seem to think that Sajid Javid could be getting it. That's basically because during the debates he mentioned the Treasury quite a lot. So a lot of people are thinking he's kind of eyeing himself to get that position. And while I think Sajid Javid would be a great Chancellor, I don't think he's Boris Johnson's right-hand man. So I think Javid will remain in government. However, I don't think he's going to get the Chancellor position. No.
And also, if we look at some of the rumours, it's just likelihood. And also, Davy Davis has been tipped for Chancellor as well. This is just a rumour at the moment, but apparently he was in talks to get a cabinet role, but he said he would only accept a very senior role such as Foreign Secretary or Chancellor.
Yeah.
So that's just a rumour going around at the moment. So who knows for that?
Yeah. Now, the next position is a position which doesn't that is the Cabinet Office. Now, this is at the moment inhabited by David Lidington, and the Cabinet Office is basically the de facto deputy in the government.
Yeah.
They're not always the most influential, however, it does kind of say that they are in the government. Now, Johnson could pick a number of candidates for that role. Names flying around include Ian Duncan Smith, who is his campaign manager at the moment, and who is basically one of the most prominent Brexiteers. So he could potentially be getting that role. But Boris could put a number of candidates in there. Someone who supports him fully. Someone I don't know why I see someone like maybe that James Cleverly even getting it. I know Cleverly's not very experienced, but he's always backing Boris. So who knows? Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary. Now these are two which could potentially stay as they are.
Yeah.
Sajid Javid, I think Boris will probably keep Javid on as Home Secretary or move him to Foreign Secretary, I don't know. And a lot of people are saying in order to unite the party, put Jeremy Hunt as Foreign Secretary. Of course, Jeremy Hunt doesn't move easily. When Theresa May tried to fire him as Health Secretary, he persuaded her to keep him on. But with what Jeremy Hunt's been saying in the last couple of days, I think he's shot himself in the foot. And I mean, do you have any suggestions who you think could fill those positions?
Honestly, I'd like to see Sajid Javid stay on as Home Secretary, to be honest with you. I think he's been doing a good job there. And Foreign Secretary, of course, the other name going around at the moment is again David Davis for Foreign Secretary. He's been tipped again for Chancellor or Foreign Secretary, so he's another one who could fill the role of Foreign Secretary. I don't really know for Foreign Secretary because I think Javid as Home Secretary, keep him there. I think that makes sense. You're doing a good job there. Foreign Secretary, I don't know. Who else could we put in that role?
Dominic Raab, maybe, as Foreign Secretary.
Yeah.
That could work. The only problem is he's not very experienced, so that might not go down well.
He's not very experienced in cabinet, but he's a very experienced international barrister.
Yeah, but I've got a position I think that Dominic Raab can fill, and that is David Gauke's job of Justice Secretary. Now, as a former lawyer, as Matthew's always saying, Dominic Raab is a former lawyer, so as Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary, I just see that as a natural fit for him. Or maybe Education Secretary, because he went on a lot about education.
His big
leadership
thing was on education, so yeah.
So he could potentially be Education Secretary or Justice Secretary. I think, that would make sense for him. Other roles such as, Defence Secretary.
I think Defence Secretary was still the same.
That's currently got Penny Mordaunt in there, who's a Brexiteer.
I think she's pretty sure she's a Boris supporter as well.
Yeah, and a lot of her colleagues are very impressed with her.
Yeah.
The only other candidate is Gavin Williamson wants to go back.
Yeah, he backed Boris because he wants his job back.
But after all the Hawaii leaks and all of that, I don't think Gavin Williamson returning to that role is really what everyone wants. One role I can see Gavin Williamson inhabiting is back to his old position of Chief Whip again. Because the thing about being the Chief Whip is you got to be quite charismatic and you got to be very influential in making loads of people vote for you. And I think Williamson, because he was Private Secretary to David Cameron, he was Chief Whip, he knows the party and he's able to persuade people to do decisions. Yeah. So if he supports Boris and is supporting no deals and things like that, he could be just right for the role of Chief Whip. Other positions are kind of not as important, however, things like Business Secretary, Housing Secretary, Transport Secretary, those roles could have anything in them. Michael Gove is apparently pitched to get something. He might stay as Environment, where he's been doing a good job, or Boris, if Boris thinks that he needs a new challenge, move him to Transport, where Chris Graylin's been heading the department for the last couple of years. I don't know how Chris Graylin still has a job because he's failed in basically every department he's been in. Or Gove could go to the housing office, become housing secretary. Or maybe even, as he had so many fantastic ideas to solve the Irish backstop, place him as Northern Ireland secretary. So he has his work cut out there.
That's one way Boris gets revenge on him.
And as for other positions, I think Rudd, if Rudd is kept on, keep her as Work and Pensions Secretary. If Hancock's kept on, keep him as Health Secretary. It's basically, I don't think there's going to be as many changes as when Theresa May took over. You know, most of Cameron's cabinet was just slaughtered out. I don't think that will happen this time, but if he's going to do anything, he's going to put senior cabinet positions, Brexiteers, lower ranking positions, Remainers. I think that's how it's going to go. In terms of Brexit secretary, that could be Dominic Raab again. Yeah. David Davis again, but I don't think you said Davis wants something more.
He wants something more senior, yeah.
Yeah. So that could be occupied by anyone. The Brexit secretary might even remain with the guy it is now.
I don't know, because Stephen Barclay, he's been basically the peddler of Theresa May's deal. He's not really had any free reign. He's basically just been, yeah, let's support Theresa May. Like, she's done this fantastic treaty. Let's vote for this. He's done. What's he actually done though? Nothing.
No. I didn't even know his name.
No.
I'm not gonna lie. I've never heard of it. He's never said anything.
Like, the problem like the Brexit secretaries always had is that they've not been able to do anything. All the main talks have come straight from Downing Street by the Prime Minister's office, and essentially they've not really been able to do anything.
The most influential Brexit secretary was probably David Davis.
Yeah.
Because he actually had a bit of free reign to do things. But apart from that, Brexit secretaries don't really have any, as you said, any will to do anything by themselves.
No.
I think that might change under Boris. I think he might let the Brexit secretary... I mean, the Brexit secretary at the moment isn't even the chief negotiator to the EU.
No.
It's someone else. So...
It's someone... in fact, the chief negotiator at the moment is not even an MP. It was brought in by Theresa May, and he's a staunch Remainer as well.
And people wonder why her deal failed.
And, well, you wonder why the government's failed in Brexit altogether. The problem from the get-go is that if we had people who wanted to remain during the negotiations, so Theresa May and a lot of her cabinet was pretty much a Remainer cabinet. They never wanted to leave. Their chief negotiator, which they got in, never wanted to leave. He was a staunch Remainer as well. So if you go in wanting, like as Boris said, and great peddler of optimism as he is, that is, if you go in to Brexit and seeing as a problem to be managed, then it's not going to go well. Well, whereas if you go into the Brexit negotiation and seeing it as a golden opportunity, then you can do much better. Instead of saying, "Oh, we've got to manage this problem. What are we going to do? Like, how can we remain the most in the EU by still pretending we've left?"
Yeah,
that's basically what it was.
I think what we're going to see on Wednesday is a lot of familiar faces returning to the government. Andrea Leadsom, Esther McVeigh, all returning to government in different roles.
Yeah, Andrea Leadsom will be back, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of role. She could be Brexit secretary for all we know.
People even suggested that Andrea Leadsom be Home Secretary.
Yeah, I mean that could happen, but I don't want that. I just think they should keep Sajid Javid as Home Secretary. I don't know, I just like what he's done with the place. It's not really a Brexit heavy role. He doesn't have, he's just good at his job, so just keep him on.
Yeah.
That's what I'd say. But as for the other, I'd say it's going to be Brexiteers at the top. Remainers at the bottom.
You see a lot of new. I reckon we'll see some new faces getting it into the cabinet. Probably not just as Secretary of State, but as minister roles as well.
Yeah.
So another thing that's tipped is Jacob Rees-Mogg could be in the government, not as a Secretary of State, but as like Chief Secretary
to the Treasury.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Taking the role currently held by Liz Truss. Now, just imagine that Liz Truss and Jacob Rees-Mogg's in charge of the Treasury.
Yeah.
That could, but I'm a bit more sceptical of him actually including Rees-Mogg because that'd be a very bold decision. Mogg is on the right of the Conservatives.
Yeah.
He's against abortion. He tiptoes on the gay.
That's what I said.
Marriage
Like in
thing.
the Treasury, they're not really
Yeah,
much
I know,
social.
but it's still the idea of allowing someone with those views into the government.
Yes.
Whether it's, International Development Secretary or Chancellor, it's still someone in the government who holds those types of views. And funnily enough, Boris might be shrinking the size of the government.
Yeah,
as
he
well.
might condense and
Yeah.
a lot of the cabinet roles.
So roles such as International Development Secretary, which is basically the Foreign Office anyway, might get shrunk to just be in the Foreign Office as like an International Development Minister rather than a Secretary of State. Because I think what you've seen with May is a lot of because there's been so many departments.
They can't all sit at the table.
No, and because there's people which don't want to work with Theresa May. What you end up with is people like Rory Stewart who have got hardly any experience and they're Secretary of States.
Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense. I mean, the funniest thing I've heard is Matt Hancock's is eyeing up the Treasury.
Is he now?
Yes, he thinks he could be Chancellor.
No.
If Boris does that, he's lost my respect.
I don't know where Matt Hancock will be because he did back him and all that.
Health.
After all,
He
may stay where he is. To be honest,
I see him as health, or if they want to change him up, put him with transport or something.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully we'll see Chris Grayling out of this government at last. Because I hate Chris Grayling. He's just
failing Grayling.
Yeah,
that's what they call
my
him.
dog could do a better job than Chris Grayling. So I think it's going to be a very interesting to see on Wednesday, and of course when we know the cabinet, I'm sure me and you will discuss the actual choices because everything's on speculation at the moment. Boris says he's focusing on winning the contest, but I think we all know that there must be members of his team already planning what his cabinet's going to look like.
Yeah, no, I'm reckoning on Tuesday they'll be planning the gin and tonics already to celebrate. Whereas on TPN we drink summer fruits. Yeah. See, have a little drink break. Anyway, with that said, let us know who you think could be in the cabinet. Who you think is going to be chucked out? Or shall we say, who do you think is going to fire themselves, should I say, and resign, so they don't look like they've been fired, so they don't have the humiliation of.
May's going to have a busy day on her last day. She's going to have about 5 letters on her desks.
Yeah.
Of resignations. I mean, they'll be filled by the end of the day. I mean, I think by Wednesday evening we'll know certain men, maybe not all of them, but certainly Chancellor, Foreign Secretary, and that will know who's in government and who's going out.
Yeah.
So it's a very exciting time. So I always enjoy seeing new cabinets. It'll be the first, well, not the first, the Johnson ministry, which is still a strange thing. I've always wanted Boris as Prime Minister. However, actually saying Boris Johnson is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom still sounds strange to me. I don't think I'm going to believe it until I see it.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll be finding out tomorrow. I can't remember what time the results are announced, but they will be. No, in fact, I do. Tomorrow is the 23rd, so yeah, it will be announced tomorrow, yes.
Yes.
Theresa May's last day, she buggers off sometime in the afternoon.
Yep, usually I think when David Cameron left, it was about 1-2 o'clock or something.
After Prime Minister's questions.
Yeah, and then by the early evening, we already knew what her choices were, so I think it'll play out kind of like that. So anyway, moving on.
Yeah, so the cabinet, I think we could quickly touch on another cabinet position that they're going to have a tough job at the moment is probably Foreign Secretary at the moment, especially in the current climate. Boris Johnson's got to be careful with who he appoints. He's got to appoint someone who's going to do a good job with easing the tensions that we have with Iran at the moment. That's a bit of an issue at the moment.
Which Jeremy Hunt hasn't done anything about.
No. well, to be honest, I don't know what he's going to do yet. There's no
No.
action's been taken, so I'm hoping he does do something.
No, but that's the thing. You think he'd be out saying something about it. He hasn't said anything.
Yeah.
He's been too preoccupied with this, which, fair enough, leadership contest one thing, but when you have a crisis such like this, maybe you know, to show that you care.
Because at the moment, the Iranian forces have basically got hold of an English shipping, ship, and they're basically holding it captive at the moment. Though the Iranians said the crew's doing well and they're treating them lovely, but what we class as good welfare in this country is not what the Iranian regime would consider great welfare.
No, exactly.
Locked up in a prison with no food. That's what they would probably class as great welfare. In fact, the whole Iranian regime is backwards and, quite frankly, appalling. Just look at their rights on women, gay rights and all that. Absolutely appalling.
Yep. Absolutely appalling. But you're not going to change it. That's the problem.
No.
No.
But we got to have a good, strong foreign secretary who's going to ease them tensions and basically get all our assets out. Because ultimately, we don't want another Gulf War, do we?
No.
The third Gulf War. We already had 2. So, what's next on the topic? Well, we thought after talking about Conservatives, we're going to talk about Labour and bash the left.
Oh, goody.
I don't know if any of you lot watched the Panorama documentary on BBC.
I did.
We criticised we're not going to promote the BBC because we criticised them a lot, especially the BBC debate, which I thought was absolutely dreadful. In fact, my favourite debate out of all the things was probably the ITV one, because the moderator and the host of the debate was quite good, I thought.
Yeah.
On the ITV one.
ITV debate was the best one because it was just impartial.
Yeah.
The BBC debate, I don't know who decided that format, but if you look at some of the guests they had on there, one woman was obviously Labour supporter.
One woman was actually Labour staff. She was under the payroll of the Labour Party, and they allowed her on.
One gentleman on there was actually the leader of quite
a nasty group.
Yes, of quite an extreme group.
That was against gays, the Jews, and all that, and some horrible stuff he would post. And they allowed him on to say words have consequences to Boris Johnson over his burqa comment, and think of the words he said.
What the BBC were trying to do in there is undermine the Conservatives.
And the host as well was doing the same thing as well.
Yeah, that host was dreadful. She was asking questions which weren't even answered.
She said, the role of me is to push the candidates on to answer the question they've been given, not inject my own answers and agendas inside of them.
Which is exactly what she did. She pushed her agenda through.
Yeah.
But anyway, on to I'd recommend seeing that documentary. I don't know if it's still available on iPlayer, or if not, try and watch it on YouTube.
Will be.
Try and watch it on YouTube. I'm sure it's been uploaded. It was very interesting just to see how, since Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party, how much Labour's gone down to just being full of anti-Semites, people who are against Israel, who are just against the Jewish population in general. And a lot of Jewish members of the Labour Party are, rightly so, very scared and very concerned. Now, if you want my opinion, there is no room whatsoever in the world for anti-Semitism. I think it is wrong. I think what some of the Labour MPs Labour members have been saying is wrong. I mean, I think it's just ridiculous. You've had members like Ken Livingstone saying that there was a conspiracy, the Nazis, the Jews and Nazis were in cahoots with one another. It's like, what?
Yeah.
You've had Holocaust deniers in the Labour Party. And the leader, how's he been sorting out the problem? Well, first of all, he ignored the problem. He said there's no problem, I'm an anti-racist. That's all he says, I'm an anti-racist. That's all he keeps saying. Not solving the problem, just saying he's not involved. And what we've seen in the last couple of days is, in order to tackle anti-Semitism, is he going to suspend members? No. Is he going to try and hunt down suspected problems in the Labour Party with anti-Semitism? No. He's going to send out an educational leaflet.
An online video toolkit to anti-Semitism.
So what's that leaflet going to say? The do's and don'ts to anti-Semitism. Don't say Jews are the worst people in the world. What a leaflet isn't going to solve the problem. These people have been anti-Semites the majority of their lives. A leaflet isn't going to solve the problem. You need to kick them out.
Yeah.
I mean, you accuse the Conservatives of being anti-Muslim. Labour was once, equality, it's anti-racist. Now it's the home of anti-Semitism. And that's just wrong. Corbyn's done nothing to deal with this problem. He flip-flops on anti-Semitism all the time. He always says there's no problem, and then there might be a bit of a problem, but I'm not involved. It doesn't matter if you're not involved. You're the leader of the Labour Party. You're supposed to deal with these problems, not just avoid it.
Yeah, he's quite happy to just avoid the anti-Semitism problem. But he won't go and talk to like Jewish communities within the Labour Party or all that stuff. But he's quite happy to go talk to Hamas and the IRA as well. But no, yeah, other terrorist sympathisers and all sorts of awful people.
Yep, he confirms that he's a supporter of the Palestinians and Palestine now.
And Hamas as well.
Say what you want. You can say Israel doesn't deserve to exist. It's Palestine. You can say that. But the fact is, that's not what happened. Israel is Israel. Palestine is Palestine. Now, yes, of course, you can say, years and years ago.
There's a whole issue on that still.
But you can't have a leader of a British political party which could potentially become in power hold these kind of views. If he became Prime Minister, we would be isolated from everything. I mean, he said, let's pull out of NATO.
Yeah.
Really? You want to pull out of NATO? Who's he going to turn to instead?
Well, I think what he wants is remain the EU and join the European Army.
It's absolutely we can go on about Corbyn's flip-flop. He's been Eurosceptic his whole life until, a couple of years ago. And he's only just come out and said, oh yes, we'll support another referendum. He's not...
Oh no, he's calling it a what are they calling it?
Yeah, well...
Yeah, like a people's vote, basically.
It doesn't matter. He can say what he wants. The only reason he is saying that he will now support a second referendum or people's vote is because he wants to get in power.
And his own party's pressured him into it as well.
Yeah, he wants to get in power as quickly as possible. And actually, a lot of the things he's talking about, such as nationalisation and things like that, are not actually allowed in European states. European states are strictly against nationalisation. So how is he going to cope with that? If we stay in Europe and he wants to start nationalising the railroads, nationalising everything, do you really think Europe are going to allow him to do that? Or do you really think Europe are going to allow him to pull out of NATO?
Yeah, actually, I do.
Really?
The EU wants to replace NATO with the whole European army. United States of Europe, like they don't need Europe, they don't need NATO. They got their own bloody thing going.
See, there's going to be a backlash against this. We're all the same. Nothing's different. Yes, we are all humans, but it's the differences which make us important. I'm proud. I consider myself English. I am English. I am not British. I am English because I was born in England. I grew up in England, and I stand up for England. Now, that's considered wrong. It's okay if you stand up for Scotland or you stand up for Wales or you stand up for Northern Ireland. If you stand up for England, that's considered, racist. This is the problem we have, and that's just the thing. Soon it's going to be, racist to say you're from any country. You're European. You're a member of the European Union. We're all European now.
Members of national identity, which we should all be proud of.
What people don't understand about the European Union is why should countries like us, France and Spain bail out nations such as Greece, which can't manage their own money, which don't have any economic competence. That's not our job. We're not just a bailout company. That's the problem. We shouldn't just be bailing out everyone. And that's basically what the EU is. Yeah. It's just a bank. It's a bank which bails out nations which are struggling. And yes, we should help nations which are struggling.
Until the European Union collapses again and we're not there to help, like in 2014.
Yeah.
when Europe almost collapsed.
I mean, we've got a new European Commissioner, haven't we?
Oh God, no!
Who was elected?
The woman taking Juncker's job is even worse.
Who was elected democratically? She was the only name on the list. Where does that sound like? Yes, of course,
North Korea.
Of course. People, I don't see why people don't understand.
And no, the thing is though, it's even worse though because there was going to be there's two potential candidates. There was two blokes in the running. Everybody knew. Oh, okay, we might be able to produce. Then suddenly, out of the blue, this German Justice Secretary comes out of the blue. Hello, I'm going to be the only name on the paper now.
Yeah, and also I've heard rumours at least that it was Merkel was saying, oh, let's have one of these candidates, and then Macron was like, no, we need a woman because it's been a man. It needs to be. I mean, why Macron thinks he is in any position to say, anything when he's got 20% approval ratings in his own country? It's ridiculous. I'm sorry, but it is ridiculous. People are sick of third-way politicians like Merkel, like Macron, people who are just so in the centre that they don't really stand for any principles. I mean, yes, you can say what you want about, green party, socialism, or, nationalist parties, but they're offering something different. They're not offering just third-way politics, and I think that's what I think the Conservative Party needs to do. It needs to abandon this third way centre, because people no offence, there are people in the centre who are never going to vote for Conservative. But because they keep trying to go to the centre, they're losing votes on the right, because the right votes are going to the Brexit Party. They're being lost. The Conservatives need to re-establish themselves on the right of the path, on the right of the political spectrum again, and that's the only way they're going to achieve that. I'm sick of this centre idea. Okay, fair enough. David Cameron was a centre politician, but under May, it's just like, oh, we need to go a bit more. I mean, the Conservatives under May, no offence, they come across a bit left wing in some of the things they're doing. I mean, Rory Stewart was basically left wing.
Yeah,
that's ridiculous. They need to get right wing again. Otherwise, when next general election comes, and if they're still doing this, let's push for the political centre, they're going to lose. And I don't just mean lose a couple of seats. They'll lose loads.
Everything.
Yeah, absolutely loads. And don't say it's never happened. Because in history, political parties, such as, the Liberal Party and things like that, have gone from over 300 seats to 5 seats in just one election. So don't say it never happens, because it can happen.
Yeah, so just imagine what Brexit would be like if we had Margaret Thatcher in charge.
We'd be out.
We'd be out by now. She would either negotiate a really good deal or told them to stuff it, basically.
And they would have listened to her, because they're frightened of politicians who are unpredictable. And that's why I think Europe are terrified of Boris Johnson, because he's unpredictable. They all knew that May was a Remainer. That's why they played along with her. They were like, oh yeah, we're not going to offer you that, because you don't want to leave anyway. And she was like, oh no, please, okay, I'll give you that concession. Yeah. Boris Johnson won't do that. If they say, we're not going to give you anything, Boris will say, fair enough. And then they'll say, wait, we didn't know you were going to leave.
Yeah, walk away from the table.
And I think it was Dominic Raab said it the best. You got to be prepared to walk away.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. You got to be prepared to walk away. And that will probably happen under Boris Johnson. I think by the end of the year, fingers crossed, we would have left the European Union and we'll be in a very different place to what we are now. We can start getting back on to issues which affect this country other than Brexit, because there are surprisingly issues which affect this country other than Brexit.
Really?
Yes, I know. You wouldn't have noticed, no. But there are.
So I think this concludes our TPN podcast for this year. I don't know, we haven't planned out for our next one.
No, we haven't. Obviously we will.
Hot.
We'll probably do one on the new cabinet.
We'll try do another one once the new cabinet's established and Boris Johnson's taking his first steps and what he's going to do.
And if it turns out it's Jeremy Hunt who's won the contest, we'll do an immediate podcast where we'll probably cry and
do a forfeit. But Jeremy Hunt.
Yeah, I'd probably resign as a member of the Conservative Party right then and there, which is weird because I only joined them a month ago, so that would be a very short membership.
and I'm so confident that Boris Johnson was going to win. If Jeremy Hunt gets in charge, I offer to do the TPN podcast naked. That's how confident I am.
I'll hold you to that. I'll hold you to that indeed. So we will do another TPN. It's a bit hard because we both.
Well, I hope Jeremy Hunt don't win now.
because we both work. It's a bit hard meeting up to do this, and of course,
we're not unemployed people.
As you can see, we've changed where we do it
Like
quite often.
It's a new location every week.
Well, I think that that's good. We keep it fresh. You can get quite stale in the same location, so we've kept it fresh. So I'll just hand over to Matthew because it's his thing, and
it's meant to be. He talks more.
Yes, I get passionate about these things.
So that is that for this edition of the TPN podcast. Join us soon, where we will also be exploring an alternative way that Parliament and the government could be formed and arranged in from the elections all down to how elections are held, like how many people represent each area based on such and such.
Even what parties would contest those areas. That's my baby. That's my idea. And if it fails, then Matthew will never let me pitch another idea for TPN ever again.
Oh, he's fine.
So I hope you guys look forward to that. Matthew will be involved in that, as will I be. I hope you enjoy that.
Yeah. Right. Toodaloo then. We'll be off for the evening for afternoon tea, it seems.
Yes. Strawberries and Prosecco.
Strawberries and Prosecco. Right, bye.